So what they did was pretty sensible. They took them out of the Gaza Strip and they put them in the West Bank illegally. But Israel never relaxed its control over the Gaza Strip. I mean, it maintained its occupation. In fact, sorry? I don't know what you're saying. I can't hear you. Can I continue? By June 2006, that's about 6 months after the withdrawal, Israel had already fired about 7,700 rockets into the Gaza Strip. It maintained the controls. It maintained the border controls. It maintained the siege. A major event took place in January 2006, about 2 months after the withdrawal. There was an election in Palestine. It was a free election. It was internationally monitored. Everyone said free and fair. The only trouble was it came out the wrong way. Hamas won the election. The U.S. and Israel instantly turned to harsh punishment of the Palestinians for voting the wrong way in a free election. And that was reported in the front page of the newspaper. It wasn't concealed. Perfectly obvious. And furthermore, was accepted. I mean, obviously we punish people if they vote the wrong way in a free election. That was going on particularly in Gaza. The Israeli attacks just increased through early 2006. And they got much worse later, but we don't have to go into that. As for the leaflets, yeah, that's correct. When the U.S. and Israel carried out an unprovoked act of aggression against Gaza, which is a major war crime, then yes, they dropped leaflets a couple of minutes before they were going to bomb somebody's house. Okay, let's all applaud. The crucial, I'm sure we'd be happy if, say, Iran started bombing our homes, but dropped a few leaflets in advance. The crucial issue, I'm afraid you evaded. The crucial issue is what decision the U.S. and Israel made on December 28th, 2008. They had a decision. Should they accept a ceasefire, which they knew was going to work, because it had worked until Israel violated it, and there's no reason to see any change, which would have ended the pretext for invasion, or should they instead invade? Okay, we know what they decided. They decided to invade. Okay, that's a pure act of aggression. The Nuremberg trials called the supreme international crime, encompassing all the crimes that follow. That means it's not even necessary to investigate the disproportionate force. As I mentioned, the Goldstone report gave Israel a free pass on this. It refused to look at the crucial issue. And it's very interesting that almost nobody in the United States, and as far as I know, Britain, or what I've seen of Europe, this just can't be discussed. It's an amazing illustration of the extraordinary force of U.S. propaganda. People can't even see how ludicrous it is. I mean, here's an easy way to solve a claimed problem without the use of force, but we refuse because we want to attack. And then comes a debate about whether during the attack the force was disproportionate. You can't imagine a free pass beyond that.
All right, next question, and please keep it brief and questions.
Okay, well, the only non-question part I want to thank Professor Chomsky and appreciate. I think audience members hopefully enjoy his talk as much as their grandparents did. I actually share something with Professor Chomsky in that I'm older than probably most of the people in the audience. Yeah. And
we can skip the insults.
It's a two-part. I grew up at a time when the South African apartheid anti-apartheid movement was live in colleges, and I guess one question is, in contrast to that, why the current BDS movement seems to be so deeply involved with not actually genuine successes but hoaxes, like Hampshire College, and of course I can mention others that are clear hoaxes, TIA-CREF, BlackRock, virtually all the things claimed last year as successful BDS were hoaxes.
I'm sorry, I lost you.
Well, I guess the
what
question
does
is,
TIA-CREF have to do with...
these are all boycott, divestment, and sanctions, quote-unquote successes, BDS, boycott, divestment, sanction, the point of this meeting, that just turned out to be frauds.
Do you have a question?
And yeah, so I'd like you to compare and contrast the South African apartheid movement involving genuine divestment with the current one that seems to involve fraudulent. And also, just because you mentioned J Street, I just want your reaction to their comment today that, quote, "We strongly oppose Israel Apartheid Week," this is J Street speaking, "because we believe it employs inflammatory, inaccurate language, misrepresentation of the complex truth of the conflict, undercuts debate, alienates significant numbers of students, and advances the agenda of the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement." This is the group you mentioned represents center.
Is there anybody here who hears a question? I don't hear it. Yeah. In fact, or even a comment that's relevant to anything that was discussed. Yeah. I mean, I understand your emotions, but I don't understand anything beyond that, I'm afraid. What does any of this have to do with what we're discussing?
Well, I had a question mark at the end. Does today's divestment movement, with its reliance on hoaxes such as Hampshire, really bear any resemblance to the divestment movement in South Africa?
Okay, so does the Hampshire divestment proposal...
Fraud.
Does the Hampshire divestment proposal with regard to Israel have any resemblance to their divestment proposal with regard to South Africa? Is that the question?
Yes.
Well, the answer is that with regard to Israel, it's much more mild, so it's not the same. With regard to South Africa, if you go back to 1977, Hampshire called on U.S. corporations to divest from South Africa. They didn't call for that in the Israel case. What they called for the university, in this case, to divest from corporations that are involved in criminal actions in the occupied territories. Okay, they asked U.S. corporations to obey the law. And those actions are criminal. There's no debate about this. I mean, back in 1967, Israel's leading legal authorities, its Attorney General, Theodore Meron, who was the legal authority for the state, a very distinguished international lawyer. He's on all the international tribunals and so on. They all informed the Israeli government that any settlement activities in the occupied territories are in violation of core principles of international law. And Moshe Dayan, who was, as I mentioned, defense minister in charge of the territories, he listened. He said, yeah, you're right. It's all in violation of international law. But countries violate international law, and we're going to do it anyway. And in fact, as long as you have the Godfather on your side, who violates international law all the time, why not? But the question of illegality is not at issue. And the Hampshire petition, in this case, simply asked the university to keep to the law, not invest in corporations that are carrying out actions in the occupied territories. That's much milder than their divestment petition with regard to South Africa. So you're right, they're not exactly the same. Like the Goldstone report, they're not a free pass, but they're saying we're not going to support illegal actions.
Professor Chomsky, what would you say about the position of U.S. universities and U.S. academics on this issue compared to, say, 10 to 20 years ago, especially considering what happened to professors like Norman Finkelstein?
Sorry, I can't hear. Can you hear?
Yeah. What would you say about the position of U.S. universities and U.S. academics on this issue compared to, say, 10 to 20 years ago, especially considering what happened to professors like Norman Finkelstein?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What about Norman Finkelstein?
He's asking what was the position, how does the position change between professors and academics nowadays in regards to how they were 20 years ago on this issue?
On this issue?
Yeah.
Well, on this issue, it was almost not discussable 20 years ago. I mean, I can tell you my own experience. If I was giving talks on this issue at my own college, MIT, there'd have to be police protection, and the meetings would be broken up, literally broken up by students organized, to prevent discussion. 20 years ago, when you mentioned, I happened to be going to UCLA for a week of talks on the philosophy department. Well, when I go anywhere, I always give political talks. The big issue at that time was Central America, so I was asked to give lots of talks about Central America. But one faculty member, a tenured faculty member, who incidentally spent half the year teaching in Tel Aviv University, asked me if I'd give a talk on the Middle East. So I said, sure, I'd give a talk on the Middle East. And he announced it. One day later, I got a call from the campus police saying that they wanted to have uniformed police with me every moment that I was on campus.